In 1968, the first head-mounted display was created, so large that it had to be suspended from the ceiling. Ever since, for many, the prospect of experiencing a simulated world has been a dream. In 2016, Oculus and HTC brought that dream to consumers with what can be considered the first truly viable consumer virtual reality headsets. While these had many limitations, primarily low resolution and narrow field of view, for many gamers it transformed the way they experience gaming at home. As we're now reaching what could be considered version 2.0 of these devices, let's look at the first contender to arguably reach that milestone, the HP Reverb Pro. It's important to understand my perspective, and that is of a seated simulation gamer. So while I'll address room scale, that is not at all my playstyle. While I'd sincerely like to thank HP for allowing me this very early look, in no way is this video sponsored. As such, all opinions are my own. Please remember, with a review such as this, many things are very subjective, and as such I can only share my personal experiences. Before we start, let's talk about the various headsets I've owned and used over the years to give some perspective. Those would be the Oculus Rift DK2, CV1, Rift S and Go, the Vive and Vive Pro, Samsung Odyssey and Odyssey Plus, the Pimax 4K, Lenovo Explorer, and PlayStation VR. So just a few. Now let's look at the Reverb specifications, with the main feature that sets it apart being resolution. It features dual 2160 by 2160 90Hz LCDs with 114-degree field of view, all contained in a ski goggle style, very similar to the Oculus Rift CV1. Removable headphones, a built-in microphone, and dual Windows MR controllers are also included. It doesn't offer hardware-based IPD adjustment, instead handling that in software. Fortunately, the sweet spot is rather wide, the widest I've personally seen. There are two models, Pro at $650 US and Consumer at $600, with the Pro offering a leather face mask where the Consumer is washable fabric. Both include a 4-meter cable, with the Pro also including a 1-foot cable for backpack PCs, and both offering a 1-year warranty, where the Pro version is a swap warranty. The minimum required GPU is a GTX 1080 or equivalent, but given its extremely high resolution, you'll want as much GPU as you can get. I did all my testing with an RTX 2080 Ti. As there's a whole lot to like about the Reverb, I'm going to start with the negatives first, with the largest being the short and rather heavy cable. It's DisplayPort 1.4 and USB 3.0 at the PC side, with a large, bulky OcuLink connector at the headset. This makes standing, room-scale games less than ideal, as not only is the cable short at 4 meters, there are currently no supported ways to extend this given the amount of data being sent. I do have several active DisplayPort repeaters on the way, and will share details of that in a separate video. For now, I'll say that if room scale is your primary playstyle, the Reverb may not be for you, unless you were to use a backpack PC solution, as the pull on your head due to the heavy cable is significant. Another negative for room scale players are the standard WMR controllers, universally derided when compared to the Oculus and even HTC controllers. If you already own Steam Lighthouse compatible controllers, those can be used with Windows MR, however Oculus controllers cannot. Finally, the Reverb, like all Windows MR headsets, uses inside-out tracking. While this is much easier to set up as there is no need for external cameras or lighthouses, it can only track what's in the headset's field of view, potentially causing issues in games such as Superhot or even Beat Saber. For seated VR, in good lighting, I found the tracking to be acceptable, however not as good as the solutions from Oculus or Steam. Now let's get to the good, where we must start with the clarity of the displays. I don't want to overstate this, but screen door effect is basically a thing of the past. The image is extremely crisp and clear, with even small text being completely readable. It's hard to compare to reality, but I would describe it as looking at a 1080p 27-inch monitor at say 6 feet. Using applications such as Big Screen or Virtual Desktop is absolutely possible. The Reverb does use LCDs rather than OLEDs, so likely your biggest question is about black levels. To my eyes, they are extremely dark, every bit as dark as the blacks in the Rift CV1 and Vive Pro. Colors are rich and bright, with the contrast in the depths of space very impressive. God rays, or the blurring around bright objects on a dark background, isn't completely gone, but is far less apparent. A huge upgrade from the original Rift and Vive Pro, and better still than the new Rift S. They are there if you look for them, but in normal gameplay they never once affected my immersion. Some of the early reviews have commented on Mura, that being slight color and brightness variations on various parts of the displays, but my eyes didn't see any of this. Colors were consistent and solid, with the image staying clear right up to the extreme edges of the lens. While you do still have to move your head to focus on things, the central sweet spot in the optics is the largest I've experienced thus far. Let's now talk about comfort, as this can make or break a headset. Many don't understand that a headset is far more than its spec sheet, and here again the Reverb shines. Using the ski goggle design of the original Rift, it is only slightly heavier and equally well balanced. While the OcuLink connector is large, its location at the back of the headset didn't tug on my head. I tested the Pro version with the leather faceplate, which I prefer to fabric solutions. It is rather narrow where it meets your face, meaning the pressure is put on a small area when compared to an aftermarket VR cover, so I'll likely upgrade to that when available. The nose guard is also comfortable, I didn't feel it at all, and blocks out all ambient light. That's important with Windows MR headsets, as you'll want a brightly lit room for the inside-out tracking cameras. It does get a bit warmer than other headsets due to that enclosed nature, but not significantly. The build quality is rather high, with the cloth front feeling premium, however the plastic used in the main shell does feel somewhat cheap. Unfortunately, as this is what you're touching when you put on the headset, you're reminded of that less than premium feel each time you don it. Let's now talk about software and the games I play and tested with. As this is a Windows Mixed Reality headset, you'll use Windows Mixed Reality Portal's Cliff House, a virtual interface for interacting with your desktop and various applications such as Edge browser, weather, calendar, etc. Windows Mixed Reality for Steam VR allows you to play any Steam VR game. If you'd like to play Oculus exclusives, you'll need to set up the free community-based Revive. Once MR for Steam VR is installed, the headset functions like any other Steam VR headset. Windows MR does offer a pass-through mode for the cameras, so you can see the real world around you. This is done using a flashlight style. Wherever you point the controllers, a view of the world is superimposed in VR. While this view is stereo, the depth effect isn't nearly as strong as that in the Rift S, and is really only useful to make sure you don't run into a wall while playing a standing game, as there's no way to achieve this without using the controllers. I tested many seated, sim-based games with, of course, Elite Dangerous being my primary focus. This is where the Reverb really struts its stuff. Text in your cockpit is perfectly clear, stars are no longer blurry dots in the distance, and all the fine detail in the textures of stations and planets is easily visible. Reading the panels in your cockpit or text in the codecs is sharp and crisp. I can't overstate how big a difference this is, even when compared to the likes of the Vive Pro or Samsung Odyssey Plus, the former resolution champs. Colors are rich and the blackness of space is deep, with God rays very minor. In short, if Elite Dangerous is your game, this is absolutely the headset you want, hands down. As my first love is racing, I tested in Project Cars 1 and 2, iRacing, and Assetto Corsa and AC Competizione. In racing titles, the clarity is somewhat less apparent, given the speed at which things are going by, but when you do look down at your dash or try to make out an opponent car in the distance, they are no longer blurry messes. Unscientific testing showed I could easily identify a car at more than double the distance in the Reverb when compared to the Rift CV1. What does it take to drive this high-resolution experience? Well, in short, a lot. While the minimum specs are a GTX 1080, to truly experience this headset, you're going to want a 2080 or higher. The Reverb offers the ability to run at 60 Hz rather than 90, and for me this is huge. Refresh rates are highly subjective. Personally, I could feel no difference between the two. Again, this will vary from player to player. The huge advantage of running at the lower refresh rate is being able to increase the visual fidelity of games significantly while maintaining a constant 60 frames per second. As Windows MR uses Steam VR, it does make use of Valve's reprojection technology, halving the frame rate when necessary. However, this doesn't work nearly as well as Oculus's solution. As such, I found that when it would drop to 45 FPS, it was extremely noticeable, with visual glitches that felt like tracking errors absolutely destroying immersion. In my testing in Elite, to maintain a solid 90 frames per second, I had to run at VR low, where at 60 I could run at almost full ultra with super sampling set at 1.5. This gives a much higher overall experience to my eyes. I had a similar experience with DCS World, having to run at rather low settings to maintain even 60, with 90 almost out of the question. In contrast, in both War Thunder and Project Cars 2, I could run at or near maximum settings and still maintain 90 frames per second. With all of this, your mileage may vary, of course. I've also spent a good deal of time in Big Screen, a virtual desktop application that allows you to use any Windows application in a virtual environment. Finally, I watched a few movies in Big Screen, specifically 3D, where the effect is incredible. If you've never experienced a 3D movie in VR, it's far beyond what's available at your local cinema. Setup is rather straightforward. Windows Mixed Reality Portal is included in the latest versions of Windows 10. As such, when you plug in the headset, it's immediately detected and setup begins. The controllers come pre-paired, with you then walking the headset around your space to map out the boundaries, if you're setting up for room scale. Once Mixed Reality for Steam VR is installed, you'll complete a similar setup in Steam VR. Once complete, you'll launch games into Steam VR or via the Windows Store, if you're the one customer using the Windows Store. Once set up, you can have the headset automatically enable its built-in audio or use system audio, with the removable headphones offering surprisingly rich sound with very good bass. They detach using nearly the exact same method as the Rift CV1, but sadly are threaded differently, meaning you can't mix and match. This audio is recorded with the built-in microphone with no EQ, and while it's not great, it's generally acceptable for chat. When post-processing effects and EQ are added, it's far better, possibly even good enough for streaming, if you want to make your audience suffer through streaming in VR, that is. While the Reverb isn't perfect or the holy grail of virtual reality, it is a huge step forward, specifically for seated simulation experiences such as flying or racing. The mix of comfort, image clarity, and low God rays makes it the ideal choice for elite pilots and sim racers alike. Held back only by its room scale experience due to weak controllers and a short and heavy cable, I'd go so far as to not recommend it for those players. While I'm also excited by the upcoming Valve Index, primarily due to its reported 20% increase in field of view, the Reverb will remain the clarity king for the foreseeable future, as there has been no headset announced yet to rival it, with only a tease from Acer of a similarly spec'd device. I recently spent several days with the Rift S, where I left disappointed overall. A detailed look at that is coming soon. To sum up the HP Reverb, if you're a seated simulation player, whether flight or racing, the Reverb is the headset you want. Again, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to HP for allowing me this early look and to share my thoughts with all of you. This has been Commander Exesius, reminding you to fly dangerously, and thanks for watching.